If I told you two people could retire with the same income from the same starting portfolio and one of them ends retirement with millions more than the other, would you believe me? Most people think retirement success comes down to how much you save or what the market does. In reality, it often comes down to how your assets are allocated and how intentional your strategy is managed over time. In today's episode of Money Not Math, we're going to challenge one of the most common retirement assumptions: the idea that target date funds, or simply reducing equities every year, is the safest and most efficient way to retire. We will walk through why that approach can be inefficient, how glide path and asset allocation decisions affect your portfolio while you are working and in retirement, and what happens when those decisions are coordinated with Social Security timing, tax strategy, and how you actually spend in retirement. These are not market predictions. These are planning concepts that show how strategy drives outcomes. Let's get into it. I'll share my screen now. Hopefully that works well for those of you who are watching. If you're listening, I will do my best to make it valuable to listen to. I know not all the details come through all the time, but we'll do our best to make it valuable. Okay, so just to get you set up here, as you can see, I'm just assuming these people are starting out with a net worth of $2. I just gave each of them a 401k with $1 in it to help me allocate properly. Goals, they're going to both retire at age 67. Of course, we can flex that around. Their monthly expense is going to start at $7,130 per month after taxes. Their income while they're working is $100,000 for Glide and $50,000 for their spouse. I know names aren't very creative, but you get the point. Their Social Security will be determined based on their income and the projections that come along with that and how our Social Security works. They're each saving 10% of their income into their 401k with a 3% match, and they are both currently 34 years old. So that is where they're starting. $100,000, a total of $150,000 of income, basically starting from scratch with $2 saved, saving 10% of their income with 3% matches each. And this is where we get to retirement. And if you haven't seen me do one of these before, I recommend watching some other videos. I give a little more background. But basically, if they that's what they do for the rest of their lives from age 34 to 67, they will have about the ability to retire and spend about $10,100 per month after taxes with no additional planning. They just put away their money into their 401ks. They have a target date fund. So they're starting with more equities when they're younger. And then naturally, as they get closer to retirement, they decrease how much equity they have and increase how much fixed income or bonds they have, because that's how target date funds work. So I'll show you that quick on how a target date fund works. So this is how most people's retirement savings works. When you're younger, your target date fund's going to say, "Hey, you're far away from retirement. Let's own mostly equities." So in this example, it's 90% equity to start and 10% fixed income. And then, hey, as you get closer to retirement, let's decrease your equity exposure because market volatility is scary. So we keep decreasing by age 60. We're down to about 75% equities. Then by age 67, we're down to about 60% equities. And then by age 75, we're down to about 40% equities. And by age 88, we're down to about 20% equities. So that's the blue line here. It's showing you this is a very default or normal or standard, what's called a glide path. And that's how much equities you've allocated over time. So this is how a target date fund works. Like I said, the further you are from retirement, the more equities you hold. The closer you get to retirement, the less equity you hold, and the closer you get to your projected death date, the less equities you hold. Just slowly decreases equities and increases fixed income. So that's how a default glide path or target date fund works. So if you're doing no additional savings, you're just you're like most Americans, you sign up for your 401k and you did nothing after that, they're going to put you in a target date fund for the most part. This is what your portfolio could look like if your combined income is 150,000, saving 10% with 3% matches. So not a bad retirement, right? $10,100 per month of income from age 67 to Mr. Glide Path is living to 87, Mrs. Glide Path is living to 89. These are just projected dates based on current averages of life expectancy. Of course, every situation is different. We're using a most aggressive asset allocation to start, so that's where you see that 90% equities, and we're doing no additional planning from there. So the main point I want you to get out of this video is why your glide path or your asset allocation or how much equities you own and when matters so much. Okay, so I just showed you what it looks like if you're in a very standard target date fund, start at a high percentage of equities, and then slowly decrease over time. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to switch to the five stone strategy. And that is where we take our clients and we try to maximize their growth throughout their careers. And then when we get to about 5 to 6 years from their retirement, we build an income reserve of money that's not dependent on equities that they can live on. And then we allocate the rest to fight inflation because we know, historically speaking, there's over a 90% chance that on any given 5 year rolling period, that the market will be up. So if we can insulate ourselves from any 5 year period with an income reserve, why not fight inflation with the rest? And here's why that's important. Because if we have $100,000 saved over 30 years at 5% interest, which is historically about the average of fixed income historical growth is about half of equities. That $100,000 over 30 years is going to grow to about 432,000. Now, if you have $100,000 growing at 10% over 30 years, the historical average of equities or stocks, that 100,000 grows to 1.7 million. So even though 10% sounds like it's only twice as much as 5%, because of compounding over time, it grows almost 5 times more because of how compounding works. That is why owning equities versus fixed income is so important. And I'll show you that again in a different way. In this example, so we're using most aggressive. If we flip to the opposite end and they were just super terrified of market volatility, so they started in a preservation portfolio, and it's crazy to think, but I have reviewed potential new clients' portfolios that are holding a majority of fixed income and bonds or CDs at the bank because they've been so convinced by the news that market volatility is terrifying. This is what that would look like if they were to go to a preservation portfolio rather than an aggressive asset allocation portfolio. They're going to drop about from 3.4 million to 2.86 million. Oh, that's the five stone strategy. Sorry. Ignore what I just said. They're going to go from, so correcting what I just said here for a second. If you have the most aggressive portfolio and do a new additional planning, just use your target date fund, you're projected to have about $3.4 million in median ending portfolio after spending about $10,100 per month in today's dollars and adjusting for inflation over time. If you were to go to a preservation portfolio, 20% equities today, 80% fixed income, and decrease that over time or hold that, you're going to drop from about 3.4 million to 150,000. That's a $3 million decision to avoid volatility. Okay. So that's number one. It's really important to understand the difference between short-term risk in the market with volatility and long-term risk and opportunity when it comes to growing your wealth. All right. So hopefully that helps you better understand what we're talking about today and why target dates aren't necessarily your best option. Within that, let's get a little more detailed. What if you can leverage a five stone strategy where we use income reserves and maximize your growth potential with the rest? What is that going to do to your portfolio? So now, by simply making that one shift, that singular shift from a default glide path of like or a target date fund where you slowly decrease equities every year until you retire and keep it decreasing until you die, to our five stone model where we try to help you build an income reserve and fight inflation with the rest because we understand inflation is it matters. Everything gets more expensive every year. That simple, singular strategy shift can adjust your median ending portfolio from 3.4 million to 8.6 million. That's a $5 million decision. That's a $5 million opportunity. That's a $5 million big deal. And it increases your probability of success from 80% to 89%, which is great. You can just walk away saying you increased your legacy by $5 million. Or, as we've discussed in the past, but a quick reminder, our goal is always 80% probability of success for not always, I shouldn't say that, most of the time. Because if you're at 100% probability of success, you're probably being too conservative if your goal is to maximize your retirement enjoyment. But if you're below 70% probability of success, you're getting too close to us risking running out of money before you run out of breath. So we want to avoid the biggest risk in retirement, which is running out of money. And we also want to avoid the lesser risk of not enjoying your retirement to the fullest, So that's why we try to aim for about 80% probability. But all of our clients have different mindsets and goals. Sometimes we're a little more aggressive, sometimes we're a little more conservative. Every situation is different, but you get the point. You can increase your probability of success by 9% and your median ending portfolio by 5 million by simply just adjusting your glide path to, rather than just set it and forget it with the target date fund, actually being intentional with how you allocate and have a strategy with how you allocate your investments. All right. So if you that's all you take from this video today, perfect. I did my job. Now, if you're a nerd like me or you just want to learn more, keep following along to see how much more we can impact your portfolio and your overall experience by making some more strategy observations and adjustments. So the next thing we can look at is Social Security. What if, rather than just turning on our Social Security at age 67, the day we retire in their full retirement age, what if we optimize our Social Security and we wait until age 70 in this example for these people? That's going to increase your probability of success by another percent, and your median ending portfolio is about the same. So not a huge difference there. Then it's just a discussion of, what's more important to you, legacy or guaranteed income early on and things like that. But that's a good conversation to have with all of our clients because some people feel better about turning on Social Security early. Some people feel better about turning it on later. So if the outcome is the same, why not discuss what you prefer? Tax strategy. What if we can maximize your tax strategy? What's that going to look like? That's going to increase your probability of success to 96% and increase your median end portfolio from 8.6 million to 14.2 million. That's a big difference, right? Massive difference on how intentional you are with how you allocate your money regarding taxes, both while you're working and in retirement. And last but not least, what if, rather than just doing the default inflation adjusted strategy, which is basically the most typical strategy for most people, and that says that the day you retire, you figure out what you can spend, and then each year you just increase for inflation. Even though that seems like it makes sense because inflation happens every year, the problem with that is that most people's retirement follows more of what we call retirement spending smile. When they first retire, they're the youngest and most excited they're ever going to be in retirement. So they want to travel, they want to buy new lake cabins, they want to go see their kids, they want to do stuff. And then as they age, they slow down, and so does their spending. And then as they age some more, medical stuff happens and they spend more. So that's where the retirement spending smile comes in. What if we take a more realistic approach to your spending? What does that do? And just like that, we've increased your probability of success from 80% to 99. We've increased your median ending portfolio from 3.4 million to 15.8 million. Keep in mind, these are projections, not guaranteed values. But what a massive difference. These two situations, they made the exact same amount of money in their careers. They saved the exact same amount of money each year. The Social Security looks the exact same, but by being intentional with their strategy around their glide path or asset allocation, their Social Security, their tax strategy, and their retirement spending strategy, they in theory increase their median ending portfolio by 50 or 30, wow, math, $12 million dollars. That's a big deal. Or if you don't want to leave a $12 million dollars more legacy, we could just increase how much you spend. What does that look like? Okay, so you can either increase your median end portfolio from 3.4 million to 15 million, or you can increase your spending from 10,100 per month after taxes to $14,100 per month after taxes in retirement. And that's in today's dollars. It adjusts for inflation. Don't worry, I can go more in depth if you want. So that's 4,000 more dollars per month or $48,000 per year after tax, and increase your median ending portfolio from 3.4 million to 8.6 million. That's a massive difference with the same input, just more intentional strategy and working with someone that you trust and knows what they're doing, that takes a holistic approach to your retirement plan. So again, it's not about timing the market. It's not about just setting it, forgetting it, and target date funds. Good retirement planning comes down to being intentional with what you're doing, and where you're doing it, and why you're doing it as soon as you can. And don't worry if you haven't done it yet. We can't go backwards in time. The best thing you can do is take action as soon as you can to be more intentional with your planning. And if you haven't answered all these questions, Even if if you already work with someone else, just reach out and I'm happy to give you a second opinion. And maybe it makes sense for the work I do to supplement the work you're already doing, or maybe it just makes sense to get a second opinion and bring some ideas to the person you're already working with. Either way, I love helping as many good people as I possibly can, and I hope this illustration brought you value. With that being said, if there is one takeaway from today's episode is this: retirement outcomes are rarely determined by a single investment or single decision. They are shaped by how well your asset allocation, glide path, social security timing, tax strategy, and retirement spending plan work together over time. Plus, of course, you have to save. Of course, right? The more you save, the better. But anyways, even if you save the same amount, these other things can make a big difference. Too often, people rely on default solutions like target date funds without ever stepping back to ask whether those strategies are actually aligned with their goals, their income needs, or the length of their retirement. If you are approaching retirement or already retired and want to understand how these strategies interact in your own plan, we invite you to start a conversation. There's no obligation and no pressure, just clarity around how planning decisions can impact long-term outcomes. You can reach out through the link in the description or visit our website to learn more. Thanks for watching Money Not Math. We will see you next time. This content is for educational purposes only. The examples discussed are hypothetical planning illustrations and are not guarantees of future results. This information should not be considered individualized investment, tax, or retirement advice. Investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. Please consult a qualified professional regarding your specific financial situation before making any decisions. Thank you again for your time. I hope you have a great day. Bye.